the planet. We're going to talk Leagues Cup. We're going to talk what he thinks about what's going on around the world and what he thinks about Leagues Cup, what he thinks about Seattle and what's going on there. So as promised, here's the man to wrap up the week. It is Thursdays with Niko on a Friday. And what cup of coffee are we on, sir?
Second cup of coffee today. What's going on, everybody? Happy to be on. Lots to talk about. It's been a fantastic week. Leagues Cup has been anything short of amazing, really, in terms of entertainment, at least. It was just, I think, the Messi effect to get things started right off the bat. And now we're down to closing down the group stage of this Leagues Cup. And, man, it's just been lots of goals, lots of fun.
Yeah, so let's talk Leagues Cup. And what was your initial, and depending on the individual, you're either hot or cold about Leagues Cup. You either like it or you don't. You know, you've either got the bandwidth, you've got the channels, the devices, you've got that availability, you're ready for it. I know a lot of folks are mad about breaking up the MLS season with a month where you're focusing on Leagues Cup. When you saw Leagues Cup coming, what was your initial thought of the tournament?
I liked it. I mean, I've said it multiple times in various shows that, yes, you can look at it as a money grab. You can look at it as something that perhaps it's kind of being forced around in general senses because of that desire to get these two leagues which kind of run the CONCACAF together. But the entertainment value, that the soccer level, what's going to do for you in learning from both as a MLS teams, right? And I'll tell you what they've been learning here in a second. And then MX in their own way, also learning from other styles, playing different competition, playing some really good level soccer players. So in that sense, it also helps the level of soccer. And then from a fan standpoint, you're globalizing both leagues. You're globalizing the stage, right? Because in this one, MLS has done a little bit for Liga MX, having Busquets and Messi, right? So everybody's looking at these games. So I've always thought that it was going to be an important tournament for both leagues.
When you look at how things are going from a local perspective, I know that we went into the standings and there's a big match against Monterrey coming up on the weekend. What has been the overall thought pattern about the early returns for Seattle? Because, I mean, right now in the group, Seattle's looking up at everybody, and that's not something that folks there want to see. You've got one match to go. It's the match against Monterrey to determine whether you're advancing or not. I mean, it's got to be a big moment and a big thought pattern for the fans there in Seattle.
Yeah, no one's happy. No fan is completely happy. Some are beyond angry. And I've done a lot of DMing. I've done a lot of posting on various groups of fans. But the reality is this one. I mean, yes, this Sounders team got absolutely run off the field by RSL at RSL. They looked at a source. They looked at a saint. They were outdueled, outplayed. But you have to understand that this team has had a really, really rough time trying to get one starting 11 consistently on the field. And that has minimized the effectiveness of a lot of players. And as Sounder fans in general, and let me talk to you guys, Sounder fans, if you guys are out here looking, immortality has a price. And you're paying for it. In MLS, for you to be able to do what Seattle did from 2016 to 2022, being not just a contender, but a consistent finalist in MLS Cups, getting 2 titles, being the one and only team in MLS that will ever win CCL necessarily, because that format has changed now. So, there you have it. In order to do that, you got to suffer at some point. I mean, you maximize your cap space, you maximize everything, because in sports, what you're trying to do is get the best collective group of players once in a lifetime. And then you maximize that to achieve everything you can. Whenever you get that golden generation of soccer players, football players, basketball players, all you want to do is maximize that window to the best of your capability. And then what happens later, we'll deal with that later. So because of that, fans need to understand that times are rough. There's a generational change coming. There's a good chance that Seattle might not get through in this League's Cup, and maybe we'll have some time off to figure out what's going to happen in domestic play in MLS tournament. But in reality, man, that's the truth of it. That's exactly why Seattle is in this uncharted waters of trying to figure out what's going to really happen.
And Seattle is not the only team that, I know a lot of folks were wondering early on in this tournament, okay, it's all in America. The Liga MX teams, they're going to be fighting uphill. But it hasn't been the case where all of the Liga MX sides have been at the bottom of the table. I mean, we got Austin, who is fighting for their lives. You've got Seattle fighting for their lives. You've got Atlanta in a street fight with Cruz Azul coming up this weekend. And so it hasn't been as one-sided, I think, as a lot of folks thought it was going to be because of all of these home matches. And you're seeing a lot of the bigger guns in Major League Soccer with their backs against the wall coming into this weekend.
Yeah, actually, I believe if I have it correctly, I have 9 wins for MLS and then 7 for Liga MX in direct matchups. And that's including, of course, PK shootouts and getting that win in terms of that format in this group stages. So it has been good. MLS started off pretty well, but it was against those lower teams, the Pueblas, the San Luis, the Querétaro, right? All those teams that maybe are not the bigger clubs in Mexico. And then once the big boys got on there, things kind of changed a little bit. I mean, you saw America completely expose San Luis yesterday. Once San Luis was unable to get the ball with that first line of confrontation, and America was able to play through pressure. I mean, it was 2-3 touches. Quiñones coming from Atlas was a huge and fantastic signing for this America team. He played well, beyond well. He played amazing alongside Henry Martin. They both fed off each other. Julian's movement in and out of lanes and playing outside and coming back in. I mean, it was just too much for this San Luis team to handle. But we knew San Luis was limited. We knew that they were kind of a one-trick pony, and once that trick doesn't work, then you're kind of out of sorts, and that's what you saw against the America team. On the other hand, you had Cincinnati dominate at least a half. We'll see what happens here today when we resume that game that was stopped because of weather issues and lightning. But in that half, I thought Cincinnati was dominant. I mean, Chivas had no answers for the pressure. Lucho Acosta was conducting the ball, dribbling. He was passing the ball well in between lines. Vasquez, who was not intended to start that game, also right on point. Any touch he got inside the 18 was going in the net. So it was a 2-0 lead for Cincinnati. So you've seen both aspects, right? All in all, the conclusion is that both of these leagues, the teams, they're getting close. And in terms of level, they're very equal at this point. So if you were thinking the Liga MX was so much better than MLS, now you're getting a real sense for what it is. I still believe that all in all, MLS in general senses, from the worst team to the best team, has looked better. But we'll see what happens here on out. Now, let me try to finish off this whole point on teams fighting for their lives. Just talking to you a little bit about the Sounders, because they're going into this Monterrey game. They need a 3-goal at least to get through. They're playing without Stefan Fry, who dislocated his pinky. He tried to fix it himself and I think did more damage than good. He went to a specialist. Now he's out for a short time, but he would not feature in this Sunday game against Monterrey. No Christian Roldan, again in concussion protocol. He got an elbow to the head at RSL, was not playing like himself all first half. Brian has to take him off. Now he's out for this game. Another big problem for the team. Now, what I do like is that it seems, and what I'm kind of seeing, is that starting 11 that I was hoping was going to get on the field will get on the field for this one. So I'll give it to you real quick. Cleveland at goal. You're going to get Alex Roldan going from right to left. Alex Roldan, Yemer Gomez-Andrade, Reagan, and Nuhu. In the midfield is going to be Albert Rusnak and João Paulo. That duo, for me, has been really good for this squad before. is once again going to get another shot. I think he's going to get experience, going to get a lot of dominant play in terms of possession and balls through. So I like that. In the line right above them, you're going to have Jordan Morris out right. Nicolas Lodero going back to that 10 position that he loves so much with all the freedom to gravitate to the left pocket where he is very effective. And Leo Chu on the left with Raul Ruidiaz up top. So I think this is a good team. Do I think it's enough for 3 or 4 goals? I don't know. We'll see. I mean, maybe if they reignite that fire of that team that won CCL, well, hopefully, Raul Ruidiaz has a monster game. Jordan, coming back. Nico, too. He hasn't been playing that position often or as often as he has in the past before. So can he just show everybody that's where he should be? We'll see.
Has St. Louis been finally found out? Has it finally taken the world to sit there and see a 4-0 butt whooping by Club America? Because it was 1-0 at the break. Henry Martin scores in like the 5th minute. It was 1-0 at the break. And then second half, it's like the switch gets flipped and it was bam, bam, bam. And it was 2, and then it was 3, and then it was 4. Do you think that this is going to be the tape now that will go out to everybody in the Western Conference to sit there and say, this is how you handle all caps SC?
Yeah. And I think I don't think America was the first one to find that out. They got exposed in the global stage, but I think in MLS, you remember that game here in Seattle, that 3-0 win for Seattle, and they've been beaten pretty hard before that as well, because they are a one-trick pony. And yes, everybody knows exactly what they're going to do in terms of that high pressure, that ability to be very direct. Now, I don't want to be dismissive, and I want to be fair to that team as well, because they are dealing with a lot of injuries still, right? So we'll still got to figure out what's going to happen when Klaus comes back. You still got to figure out what happens when they can put players in positions where they were really successful early in the year. Stroud is kind of a player that will have really good games and then some really cold ones. This one was one that he was just not looking well. He was kind of missing for a lot of this game. So I just think all in all, yes, in terms of concepts and what you will see in terms of approach and tactics, they have been found out. They have been exposed. They need to figure out what's going to happen whenever that high line of pressure doesn't work. It's okay to play a little deeper. It's okay to play in a mid block. It's okay to do certain things that maybe are not to your main philosophy, because you need to be versatile in soccer. If you're stuck to one way, it doesn't matter if you're trying to play with a diamond in the middle in a 4-4-2 like Bruce was trying to do in New England, and he figured out, hey, I need to be able to do certain things. And now he's doing, sometimes he plays with a 3-man back line, sometimes he does all that other stuff. Same thing for Seattle. So it just is part of soccer. And yes, St. Louis just hasn't been able to do that.
And they're the very Red Bullsian way that they play, the stubbornness that's attached to a Red Bullsian approach. If you want to kind of, give yourself a little bit of width and body to your bio, it's gonna be an interesting test for Pfannenstiel, the front office, and Bradley Cornell to sit there and say, okay, we've got to come up with different ways to try to be ourselves here, even though our style is, literally for me, it is a very Red Bullsian style from where Cornell came from. Yeah,
100%. And I think they have to figure out and understand that what they were doing, taking the league by storm, is great. It works. But if you want a long, sustained success, you also need to get a little bit more talent. So I think a right winger would do this team a lot of help. Another productive player that's going to maybe be a target forward as well. Giochini, God, you got to just applaud his effort and the runs he makes and how much effort he puts out there. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's just not enough, and he gets drowned by defenders. And once he gets no service, it's tough for him to get away from that. So the team just needs a little bit more help.
Now you look at a question from our buddy Bam, who is watching from Australia late night on a Friday. So for Bam, it's like this is how he ends his days, hanging out with us. He's got women's World Cup going on all day, and he hangs out with us before he goes to bed. Bam has a Leagues Cup question for you. Would it have been better if all Leagues Cup groups were put into a neutral city and all games were played there instead of having the Liga MX teams coming up and all of their action played here in this part of the world. Bam is wondering if neutral site would have been better.
Yeah, you know what? I like that. I mean, the whole style of play is very World Cup-ish, so why not do something like that where you have the same World Cup style where you have teams play in certain stadiums neutrally and everybody plays in those stadiums, and then you move on once that gets over and done with. So I like the idea. Honestly, it hasn't paid dividend for MLS at times, because Mexican fans, they travel so hard and they're so passionate that, I mean, you saw it right when he came to St. Louis, those American fans were everywhere. You saw them, the way they run. I mean, man, it is impressive. Leon as well. It didn't matter where they were playing. You saw that fan base. You saw it last year. I saw it in Vegas when it was just like the showcase against the Seattle Sounders in that final. So yeah, I like the idea. I think in terms of logistics, player safety that you hear all the time from soccer federations, and it never really seems to be a priority. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea.
Well, and I know that, and Michael Head, one of our other listener Twitch pitchers, says if all matches were played at neutral cities, the crowds would be sparse. And I know that in one of those examples, the group that's played at Q2, where you had Mazatlan playing Juarez, was basically friends and family. And I mean, literally, there was a lot of Verde that you could see. Verde y Negro was right there. You could see more seats than you could people, and I guess that's the danger that you have with doing something like this. That's
a very good point. That's a very good point. There are teams that still don't have that traveling fan base in terms of MLS. I think that you could see a hit on standings, and that could be the reason why they kind of went for it this way. They're playing it safe. Regardless of the city, you're going to get X amount of fans going to watch the home team, and then you add the Mexican fans that will travel from anywhere, and plus the ones that are in the city. So you probably have better odds in terms of attendance. So yeah, that's probably the reason why.
Well, and I know that as a TV partner, you want to have that TV environment. You want to have full seats. You want to have the environment like you saw at All Caps when Club America came to visit last night. Legitimately, we should not be surprised, I don't think, that Liga MX teams, especially the Grandes, will travel. So I don't want fans who are watching Leagues Cup or who might have been watching Leagues Cup in home markets to be surprised when you see things like we saw at All Caps last night with all the Club America fans that were there. Don't be surprised by those kinds of things. The fans in those fan bases will find ways to travel. They will be loud, they will be noisy, and it will be something that might be a bit of a sticker shock first off, but it's something that you've got to get used to because they're going to come after you, and you've got to be – I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing how many Cruz Azul fans show in Atlanta on Saturday night because of their history. Just don't be surprised by the Grandes and their fan support. Just don't be surprised by that kind of stuff.
Well, Cruz Azul will travel. Believe you me, that stadium will be full of blue in certain sections. That's a big traveling fan base. It's one of the greats of Mexico, and some might cringe when I say that, but it's the reality. Los Cementeros are a good traveling fan base. They're one of the big clubs. So it'll be interesting. I think at the end of the day, what you're seeing is just the start of something that could change heavily in the future. And the format, the level of soccer and the globalization of it, it's what you want to start off with. How it's going to play out in the future might change, right? In a couple of years when this MLS fan bases continue to grow, maybe you'll see some of those changes. But for now, I think it's been really, really good.
For an MLS team, and this is Cruz Azul fans, they are loud, Hutch says. Hutch is like, yeah, Cruz Azul fans are loud. I mean, we've had them here, and we've had Liga MX teams here, and we know what to expect when those fan bases come in. Let me ask you this. For these MLS teams that are fighting for their lives to go into the knockouts, let's say, and I don't care which one you're talking about, let's say an MLS side does not make it out of group stage. Are you the kind of guy that wants to have that team that does not make the group stage idle for that 3 weeks to figure things out so they can get ready for the stretch run, so they can rest, so they can do that kind of stuff? Or are you the kind of guy in a tournament like this where you want to get into the knockouts, you want to play as many games as possible, you want to get everybody healthy, you want to be in rhythm for those 10 games? How are you when it comes to your approach? If you don't make it, cool, we'll focus and then we'll be ready for the stretch run? Or no, I want games and I want to keep my guys playing so we can stay in rhythm where we're not having to pick up friendlies with, college teams and lower division clubs? How are you wired?
I'm wired that I want my team to go as far as I can in an international tournament. That's plain and simple. There are circumstances of teams that maybe need that time to regain players. If you have a lot of injured players, if you're trying to get players back, if you're trying to sign players and maybe take that time to figure out what you're going to do in the future. But let's say for me, not only am I putting my team in a position to perhaps get some silverware, but you're also putting a team in a position where they're competing in an elimination game, and that mentality component just changes, unifies, whatever it is. I mean, it really makes a difference for a team to get ready for the rest of the tournament of MLS play by just being at home, training, maybe doing some rehab for some players, rather than being in a complete competition and being in game rhythm, which is completely different. So I like to have my team completely angled and ready, focused for an entire competition. So let's talk about the Seattle Sounders teams. For me, it'd be better for this squad that just has a couple of injuries to move on and continue to give themselves a chance to get silverware, but also to put their current form into a test against some really, really difficult teams in an elimination round. It's that simple.
By the next time you are with us, I believe it will be the end of the summer window. When it comes to folks that are active, inactive, how much more movement are you anticipating? And you can show your crystal ball as much as you want here for the final week. But who are you anticipating needs to make moves? Who do you see already looking to make moves? When you're kind of gauging the landscape here for this last week of the transfer window, who are you seeing active? Who needs to be active? What are you looking at here in this final week?
Well, I'm looking very hard at Atlanta. I know that they're working to finalizing a couple of things. I'm hoping to drop some news within the next week or before that, man, because I feel like if I hold on anymore, Bogert or some of these guys are going to get on it. I mean, it's happened to me. It happened to me with New York, Julian, who's going to come in from Vélez. I mean, there's so many things. Facundo, Farias going to Inter Miami. This guy's going to be an absolute baller in MLS. So I think some teams are already set. Inter Miami is one of those teams that bring in Gomez, bring in Farias, and obviously Messi and Busquets and Alba, right? I mean, they're just loaded now in terms of talent. But there are teams like Atlanta that they're being very in the low, very don't look over here, but they're working on some stuff, and I'm hoping to get some of that stuff out. Portland themselves, they're closing down on a Brazilian winger out of Portugal. He should be very interesting as well. They need that help there. Although when Jimmy came back, I thought he was pretty decent. And of course, in the middle of the field with Evander, he's been really good so far, even though he kind of shot himself in the foot against Tigres here in this last game. Another squad that I'm looking at, maybe adding a couple more pieces. Could be, and this is very could be, but I think Philadelphia might be looking into getting a couple of players. So there are some teams that are still looking out there and getting some more players coming in. Seattle, if you're going to ask me about Seattle, don't. They're not getting anybody. I mean, it's over. There were some options for some MLS exchange, and that's now out the window. So I don't see Seattle bringing absolutely anybody, and that's going to drive people crazy. You'll see how they'll go bananas. I think LA Galaxy is another team that's also done with what they were able to bring. LAFC, perhaps they could do something else and bring more players. I know that they obviously just recently got a striker, right? Spanish striker that's going to be another component to that offense. But with a lot of movement and Cifuentes going to Rangers and things, you might see another player coming for LAFC as well.
And this is one of the points that I've tried to reinforce. It's two-pronged when it comes to transfer windows and things like that. Check your sources. Check your numbers, because on the 280 character app, you got to make sure that the folks that you're looking at when it comes to all of this news, make sure that when they on the 280 character app, whatever we're calling it now, you got to check for somebody that's more than like 561 followers that might be doing something out of their basement. Make sure, check your sources. And the other reminder is that just because you don't hear your team doing anything in the public sphere, just because you're not hearing rumors, doesn't mean, and this is going to be like 7 negatives in a sentence, just because you don't hear anything doesn't mean they're not working on something. Because if you work on something and you say it publicly, it puts you at a competitive disadvantage against other clubs and financially in trying to get that first tier guy that you want to bring in. You want the first choice guy, so best to work in silence than to work out in the public sphere.
Oh, 100%. And speaking of one of those, I got a lot of fans from, of course, probably this show, and thankfully for all your audience, asking me about Diego Rossi. Was he the guy that he was rumored? No, he's not the guy. Obviously letting them know that that's not what was going on. He's not the guy that they were looking at. Although I would love to have Pablo Rossi back. He's been so good. I mean, Diego Rossi. I'm sorry. Diego Rossi. Fuck just Pablo Rossi. Diego Rossi is the guy that they were looking at. And so, yes, just check your sources and do not be impatient. Some of the better moves sometimes get done under the line, under the radar, and that's how Atlanta's been able to do it. I've been surprised of how they've been able to kind of lock things up there. New York typically is the same way. This year, I think because of the agents they were dealing with in South America, they're very easily, very easily talking to the press at times, and so those things kind of come out. But yeah, a lot of teams, if you don't hear your team, doesn't necessarily mean that that's not going to happen. There are others like Seattle that are completely capped out on the salary where they just can't make any moves. But yeah, that's a really good advice there for all the fans.
Let's see. Before we go, I've just got a piece of information that has to do with said window. So we'll go ahead. NYCFC has acquired midfielder Andres Perea on loan from Philadelphia Union. Through the end of the 23 season, Union will receive $300,000 in 2024 GAM, but will retain a portion of the player's 23 salary budget charge. No option to buy at the end of the loan. So once again, NYCFC acquires midfielder Andres Perea on loan from Philadelphia Union through the end of the 23 season. The release has quotes from sporting director David Lee. Congratulations on that paragraph. Perea moved from MLS on loan to Orlando City in 2019 before joining the club permanently a year later. Traded to Philadelphia last December. 4 goals, 3 assists in 82 appearances. So once again, the final numbers. NYCFC gets Perea on loan through the end of this year for $300,000 in 2024 GAM. Philadelphia retaining a portion of the player's 23 salary budget charge. So get that little piece of news to help out NYC before we go. Question to you before you go comes from Hutch. What team surprised you as underwhelming of what you expected in Leagues Cup?
Well, that's a good question. Underwhelming in general senses.
Would Seattle be in that group?
Seattle's definitely in there. I didn't want to say Seattle first, but thank you there, John. Absolutely. Seattle getting absolutely run off the field by RSL. I'm concerned what's going to happen against a Monterrey team that ran over that RSL team 3-0. So, yeah, that's concerning. I think Nashville was very disappointing because with the whole Messi thing, and did Messi exposed MLS, and Sergio Busquets is just being able to touch the ball without being pressured. And look, no offense to Atlanta, but Atlanta's not known for defensive anything these days. And the pressure and the ability to just let him do what he wanted to do is very individual and kind of segregated by just that one team. And when asked in other shows like in Argentina, hey, who's the best defensive team in the league? Here I go talking about Nashville, and they go and play completely off their identity in this one and just open up against Toluca. They start winning, and then they can't really hold it together after that. So that was kind of hard to see, hard to understand how Nashville, a team that has been so good with Gary Smith, at least in the structure. So that was disappointing for me. From the MX side, Puebla is a team that was disappointing. I thought they were going to have a little bit of a better sense of what they were doing. Cruz Azul as well. That's another team that I thought was going to be a little bit better. Yes, Inter Miami kind of surprises them and gets that result at the very end. Cruz Azul was much better than Inter Miami in the first 45, but I thought they were going to be able to do a little bit more. So, yeah, I think in general census, that's kind of what I've gathered in terms of disappointing teams overall.
When was the last time you saw a keeper take a PK and it wasn't in a PK shootout after 90 minutes?
I think it was Rogero when he played for Sao Paulo, but I love it, man. I grew up in the Chilaver and Higuita era where these guys were the ones who took free kicks. They took PKs. I absolutely love it. Rogero is a guy that I'm sure that Toluca goalkeeper looks up to. And yeah, he's good. It's part of what they do. I think he's got 3 goals overall. So I love to see it, man. I think more keepers should get out there and take penalty kicks and free kicks, man. I grew up with that. It was so cool to watch Rene Guita running all the way to the top of the 18 to take a shot, and then if that doesn't go in, him sprinting all the way back. I mean, I love it, man. I'm all in on that.
Volpe got Toluca a bit of an advantage last night at Geodis. Last question for you before you go comes from Abby. Abby heard your studio audience and wants to know what kind of dog you have.
Oh, I know. I'm sorry. I was trying to get him away. He's a terrier. His name is Ozzy. He's the only black terrier that apparently not all of you have seen it. He's black with a little bit of white. It was funny. I'm sorry. He's a Yorkie. I just heard the missus over there tell me he's a Yorkie, not a terrier. It's a Yorkie.
Well, he acts like a terrier, but looks like a Yorkie. How about that?
There you go. Boom. You got it. He's a Yorkie. I don't know why I put them together all the time. Yorkie terrier. It's just a Yorkie. That's what he is. He's a Yorkie. Not a lot of black Yorkies. He was the only full black one from his litter, and I just fell in love with him. I'm a Raider fan. I'm all about the silver and black, and when I saw the black and white, man, I was all in. So yeah, that's little Ozzy Osvaldo Moreno.
Yeah, Yorkshire Terriers. That's how they roll. Hit the promo for me. What's going on?
Yes, so we are kind of taking a break on Soccer Bar. Our producer had some unfortunate family news. He had to fly to Argentina, so we're kind of taking a pause there. We probably won't be back until next Thursday. But in terms of Pulso, I'm going to have everything from right now. You can go and look at Joe Paulo talking about how difficult it was to get over the RSL game and what needs to be done. You'll hear Cleveland, who's going to be starting this game against Monterrey. And then whatever happens here today at the training grounds, you'll get it all at Pulso Sports. Plus, I will be doing some, or at least one Twitter space, because I need to do it, man. I need to just talk to the fan base, man, over here. People are getting ready to jump off buildings, and we don't want that. So I'm going to do a Twitter space probably later on tonight, if not Saturday morning.
You got it. At El Rolo NW, at Sports Pulso, at The Soccer Bar. Niko, my friend, it's always great to catch up with you on a weekly basis to get the Pacific perspective on what's going on. We will catch up with you next week, my friend. Be safe, be well, and knock it out of the park, eh?
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
All right. Since that's the end of the show, it's the end of a week. We got other programming coming up. We're looking at USL League 2. We're looking at the NPSL. That'll be out later this afternoon. Tonight, it's the Twos and the Crew. 6:45 pregame Eastern time, 7 o'clock here on the SDH Network. For Nico, for Jason, for Jarrett, for Nick, I'm just John. Thanks to all the guests all week long. Thanks to our friends in Australia who chime in as well. That's the end of the week. That's the end of the show. That means I get to do this.